For joining us for this critical conversation about intimate partner violence. We know that this is an issue that transcends race, socioeconomic status, education, the location that people live, and we want to provide this opportunity to provide a session where we get to hear from some of the foremost advocates and folks who are in front of us every single day in different ways. Now I want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Sheila Young-Mercado, and I'm the president of the Association of Black Women Physicians. We are also, thank you. And I'm homegrown. I actually graduated from Long Beach Jordan High School, right here. And a graduate of the Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. With us today, we also have some of our former or past presidents, our immediate past presidents, Dr. Cosette Lyons-Jones, who is also instrumental in helping set up this session today, Dr. Sylvia Swilley, and our president-elect, and I believe she's outside, Dr. Anastasia Williams, who flew in from New York last night just to be with us. So today I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. I'll go ahead and ask them to introduce their name, their specialty, and then we'll go into questions after.
Good morning, family, or good afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, family. I'm Dr. Jennifer Lewis, and I'm OBGYN. Wonderful to be here and good to see everyone.
Greetings, Queen. I'm C. Anderson. I am a licensed psychotherapist, certified hypnotherapist, and national certified counselor. Thank you so much for being in this space with us.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Angela Parker. I am the Director of Engagement and Education for Genesee Center, the oldest domestic violence intervention program in South Los Angeles. And I do want to say I'm a doctor of education. I want to let that down. No. I always want to give doctors their props. We have a different thing happening.
Well, we want to make this a session or a time where we first just start to level set, because everyone has a different idea of what intimate partner violence actually is. And so I'm going to pass it over to our speaker, C. Anderson, and just let her talk about the different types of intimate partner violence and what actually qualifies as intimate partner violence.
So first I just want to make the statement that we're all family, correct?
Yes.
So I can be very real with you. Because even under this table, I have my shoes off. I'm that comfortable. All right, so intimate partner violence, first of all, domestic violence is the umbrella under which IPV sits, right? And domestic violence covers violence that happens in the home. So it doesn't matter if it's between roommates, if it is elder abuse, child to parent, parent to child, but intimate partner violence is between romantic partners, okay? And that looks like the center being power and control, okay? So yes, we have people that fight, and there may not be a power and control dynamic, but when you have romantic couples and there is one exerting their power over the other, that is considered to be intimate partner violence. It can show up many ways, and only one of those ways are physical, right? Physical is usually the last to happen. The first is usually the psychological and the emotional. The psychological can consist of demeaning the individual, gaslighting. I know that's a term that is used inappropriately and inaccurately, but really causing a person to question their own sanity. It's not when someone disagrees with you. It is when you've had an experience and you know without a shadow of a doubt that that thing that you felt, saw, or experienced happened, and the person that says they love you says, no, it didn't. That's not what I said. Oh, I don't know where your keys are. You know you're forgetful. And the point of that is so when they are implementing manipulative behavior, they can then say, well, you know that time you forgot your keys. You know you've been under stress lately, so your experience isn't very accurate. So then we have emotional abuse. So that looks like degrading the individual. That looks like making you question your worth. That looks like you being put in a situation where you have to question who you have known yourself to be your entire life. There's also financial abuse, access to money, preventing a person from making their own wages and having access to bank accounts, debit cards, insurance, anything in the financial sector, right? And then we also have the physical. So that is what we see on television, what's usually dramatized, but then also sexual abuse. Many people don't know that just because you're married or just because you're in a committed relationship, that you can still say no to sex. Okay, so spousal and couple rape, coercive rape. If you don't have sex with me, if you don't have sex with my friends, then I cut off your allowance. Yeah, I see some facial expressions that are like, what? Yes, it happens. Controlling your reproductive rights. No, you won't take birth control because I'm going to impregnate you so that you become a prisoner. Yeah. Okay. So those are just some of the most common forms. And remember, the defining caveat is power and control. Power and control. So if you can't make decisions for yourself, if you have to cower, if you have to say, let me ask when he's a little more apt to say yes, that is what power and control looks like in real time.
Thank you so much. You know, one of the things that we talked about when we met earlier this week was discussing something that you learned about intimate partner violence that had never occurred to you when you were younger or before you received your training or before you started seeing the patients that you have. What were some of those things that sort of became apparent to you later on?
For me, and I'll give you just a bit of background so you understand where I come from. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. My mother was a single mother of 3 children, and within our home, there was parent to child, child to parent domestic violence. I also experienced teen dating violence with my eldest daughter's father, because children who grow up in homes where violence is present, they have a 50% chance of becoming a victim or a perpetrator. So I fell into the victim category. For me, I think when I realized that love didn't have to be painful, that love didn't hurt, that putting your hands on someone, demeaning someone, degrading someone wasn't normal, was a real aha moment for me. And I was the child that you like to call the black sheep, which I like to call the change agent. Okay?
Yeah.
Because we don't accept labels in here, all right?
Right.
I realized that what I was seeing at 4 years old, where I have to hide the knife because my mother is going to kill my brother, I realized that the person she was dating, my mother was very, very fair-skinned, and he would take her nose and pinch it until it would turn red, and it was funny. Hear what I'm saying? Because you know, black folk, we deal with things through comedy. And many times what we are looking at and laughing at and trivializing so that we can cope is harm. So for me, I realized that, wait a minute, boundaries exist? My body is my own? That's a new concept for me, because I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, right? So for me, it was, I am autonomous and I have agency and I get to say what happens to me. That was what I realized. So, and this is funny, but not funny, haha, but a little bit. Initially, I was going to be an orthodontist. And God said, no, you're not. And so when I started my clinicals as a therapist, I was supposed to do it in a health center at a school. I ended up in an organization who supported domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims. So I was put face to face with myself. And with that, it gave me the tools and the opportunities to heal, but to also bring healing to people who looked like me and had experienced what I experienced, and to make sense of what I had seen. And so I say all that so that you understand that it doesn't discriminate. From the person that's making $1 million a year to the person who is finding shelter in a friend's home, it doesn't discriminate. Okay? I see some heads nodding, so it's registering with everyone. Good. I wanted to land, I wanted to hit, because when you leave this room, I want you to understand that it can be anybody.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for sharing, your story, because it's those stories that resonate with us and impact us. And those stories, not your particular experience, but that we can say, hey, I recognize.
I would just echo what I've heard thus far, but in my practice, you see very obvious things, which I think most of us can recognize. You see obvious, like acute injuries, but it's also the more subtle. I think that's probably what's been the most eye-opening in practice, is things that are extremely subtle. And the patient may not open up to you the first time or the third time or the 54th time. But as long as they understand that you're there and that you're listening and that you're going to keep asking, that gives them the ability to be able to trust you. But I think probably the subtle aspect, and when I say subtle, I mean the patient who looks like everything is going completely fine and is hoping and praying that you ask about everything else but that one thing that she doesn't want to talk about. Or it can be subtle in the sense that maybe they just have a recurrent vaginal infection. So I'm an OBGYN, so most of the time when you see me, you are undressed, so it is a very intimate relationship, but it also allows me to have a very personal relationship with my patients. And so that is a very vulnerable position for some patients, and sometimes just coming in for that opens up a whole other more emotional component to what's going on. So recurrent vaginal infections, I've seen also lacerations in places that don't completely add up based on the story that I've heard. And then sometimes it can be more subtle, heart palpitations, irritable bowel syndrome, right? It's not always specific to my specialty. It can be in any type of specialty, because women, we have other parts besides our uterus, tubes, and ovaries, right? So other things go wrong with us when there are other emotional aspects that we're dealing with. Sometimes they can come out in other ways. So I think that's probably what I would see is most common. On the pregnancy side of things, it becomes even more interesting, because now you have not one patient but two. And so trying to navigate the presence of the partner when there is a very obvious situation going on that perhaps the patient is not ready, is not completely ready to address, and trying to keep her as safe as possible, because that's really all of our roles, right? All of our roles are, how can we keep our patient safe? And sometimes it'll display itself in labor and delivery, where a patient is not sure if she wants the partner present, or she doesn't want the partner present but is unable to tell him no, or he's making medical decisions for her. He is answering or trying to answer questions, or he is overly affectionate in that space, and then when the providers are out of the room, he's a different person. And so there's all types of things that we do to try to keep our patients safe in these scenarios. The reality is and we'll come up to this a little bit later, but we all have a responsibility as providers to report specifically both child and elder abuse, but intimate partner violence is a very gray area. It's a very controversial area, and it is often state-based in terms of what we're allowed to do. So when a patient confides in me and is not ready to make that step, I am not mandated to, let's say, call the police. And I say that in this space because it is often a limiting factor of why a lot of patients do not feel comfortable. I don't want us to snitch. But our mandating reporting obligation is for children and also for elder abuse. So it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, right? So a blessing in the sense that patients get to determine when they are ready, but it also limits us a little bit in terms of the resources that we can provide when it comes to getting out of that situation. But it doesn't mean we can't hide education in the bathroom, right? It doesn't mean we can't have posters on our walls to make sure that the education is given there. So in my world, it is multifaceted and it comes in lots of different shapes and sizes, unfortunately. And when the pregnancy aspect comes in, sometimes it's a more volatile situation, and you want to be very careful in that regard because you have a newborn to also consider. That's a long answer, but again, what we all do has lots of different aspects, so it's not necessarily a one particular thing, but I would say it can be just as subtle as some of the things I mentioned.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because all of the things that you mentioned, a lot of those things are things that we hear about, right? From our girlfriends, from particularly, our cousins, those our sisters, and then just say, yeah, it just keeps bothering me. And that should tip off in your mind, how do I make sure that she's safe, right? Because we are the ones who can support each other. We'll also talk about how we don't as well. But please, Dr. Parker.
So for us, it's a different scenario because when people come to Genesee Center, they've already identified themselves as victims of domestic violence. However, even though they have, you'd be surprised how many men, women, children, because we serve women, men, children, we serve the entirety of people who are victims of domestic violence, really have no idea what has actually happened to them. One of the first classes that we have for clients, believe it or not, is Domestic Violence 101. And you would be like, well, that's crazy. Like, they've been victims of domestic violence, they've experienced it. But as the other panelists have discussed, it's been so normalized that they don't even understand what's happened to them. They know they're here, they know they have to get out of this situation, but even like when we talk to them, because we do have mental health therapists that we work with them, it'll be like, that was actually abuse, right? You mean that was like something that like they weren't supposed to do? And even with the kids, it'll be like, but the kids they never hit the kids. And it's like, they never hit the kids, but the kids are still victims of domestic violence because they saw the abuse happening and it still affected the kids, right? Also, other types of abuse we didn't get a chance to talk about is digital abuse, right? And so like these things right here are a blessing and a curse, right? Like we're all addicted to it, right? I have my phone right here. But you know that you can be tracked through your phone, right? You can be tracked through social media. I don't know if anybody here, I know this is old fashioned, but still has like a Facebook page. Or even like a TikTok or things like that. Like sometimes I work with a lot of youth and they're like, Facebook. So I always have to preface it with that. But like they can like create like fake profiles to stalk you and see where you are. I always tell people like one of the things people want to be like is like, I'm on the corner of 54th and Crenshaw and I'm gonna be here for the next 2 hours. Well, guess what? If somebody's stalking you, now they know exactly where you are, right? So I always tell people to say where they are, like after you've gotten home or gotten into a safe space, right? So digital abuse is like really real. Also, there's spiritual abuse, which we don't think about, right? And so when we're talking about spiritual abuse, like what comes to mind is people who use like holy text, right, against you, right? Like, but God said, right? But the Bible says, but the Quran says, right? But the Torah says, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it as well. Another part of it is when people don't let you practice your faith, right? Because they know that for whatever reason you draw strength from that. Or they're afraid you're going to be in the church and you're going to say something and people are going to know your business and kind of intervene. Or in some cases, some of the abusers, they're even jealous. They're jealous of the time that you spend in the church and the friendships that you make there, right?
Yeah.
So that's important to understand that type of abuse as well. So I say this to say that it really runs the gambit, and it's no wonder people don't understand when they're being abused, because there's so many ways that they can be abused, right? And so it's just sort of unpacking that and let people understand sort of what happened to them. There's also legal abuse, right? Where people will use the court system to abuse you. They'll always have you in court over the kids, right? They'll file bogus restraining orders against you, and you're the one that's been like abused. You know, they'll run up your credit, right? So there are these things that we have to get them to sort of take a look at. Abuse in health, right? Where they not let you go to the doctor. We've had so many clients who have come to Genesee Center who have gone to the doctor for the first time and have been diagnosed with cancer, have been diagnosed with chronic issues like diabetes. And a lot of people like don't understand how serious like diabetes is, that you can die from that if it's untreated. You could die from hypertension, all right, if that's untreated. And so these are all type of ways that people have been abused that we help them see when they come through our doors.
Thank you so much. One of the things we also mentioned was, what's the role of culture? You know, what is it in our culture that sort of normalizes abuse? We all seen The Color Purple, right? And when she says, beat her, you know, like, what is it that would allow another woman to say that about another woman? What is it in our culture that allows this to be permissive?
We have to first look at things in a historical context, right? And so looking at it historically, we're immediately talking about patriarchy. And let me say this, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Very clear? Okay, I'm gonna pull the mic up.
Come on, B.
Some women are agents of patriarchy. I cannot tell you the flack that I got. I did an interview with Roland Martin breaking down Diddy's body language in the apology video. And I can't tell you how many women were in my DM saying, you are taking a black man down, right? And that's actually one of the barriers that prevent us from using our voice to say, I'm being harmed, right? Okay. So when I look at the historical context, in the same vein that black people in this country are still 75 years within Jim Crow.
Bring it.
Women, just in the last 40 to 50 years, can open a bank account. Women, just in the last 40 or 50 years, are able to have a business in their names. This is not antiquated. This is not, we're not far removed from women's rights. So then if that's not the usual, then we are still in a space where patriarchy, oppression, and then if you are a black woman, you are doubly oppressed, that intersectionality of gender and race. So we don't trust law enforcement, right? We don't want to be seen as putting another brother in jail, right? But at the same time, not wanting to be abused. So history tells us you're not going to be believed. History tells us you're supposed to be his protector. History tells us that, I'm sorry, we don't even look at you like a human. You're here to breed and make babies and cook food and make life better for us. So then, if that is the space that we've been operating in, it's safe to say that some women are going to just be okay with that, be conditioned for that. So when you ask, how do some women come to a place where they are okay with other women being abused? What I have come to know in my work as a therapist is that if you are not speaking out, you are complicit. And when you become complicit enough, it becomes normal. So guess what? If my mama was beat and my grandmama was beat and I'm being beat and it is now sewn into the hem of my garment, and there are these transgenerational issues that we have swept under the rug because what goes on in this house stays in this house. Children who grow up in that environment learn three things: not to feel, not to trust, and not to emote. Okay? So when we look at it, it makes sense. It is the norm. It is the norm to say, because I remember when I was talking about my relationship and just things that I wanted to see in my relationship as a healthy woman, and someone said to me, well, he don't beat you. Well, he pays the bill, so why do you want to be connected and be healthy and in love and have all this emotional stuff? He come home at night, don't he? That is the status quo for most relationships. So that makes sense that other women, particularly, forgive me, my mom's generation, my grandmother's generation, the elders that I honor, we got some stuff. We've got some things that we have not looked at closely to say, ooh, I contributed to that. My teenage boyfriend did exactly what Dr. Parker mentioned, dragging me into court repeatedly. Like, I had trauma around being in courthouses. And that was one of the ways that he would attempt to control me. And my mother, who, because she was in her own trauma, she put me out. I was 19. I slept on my best friend's floor at Howard for a week before I was able to pick myself up and find a place to live. And I'll never forget going back to my mother's house, the house I had grown up in, the house that had been abused, and the house that was home to me, and knocking on the door to pick up my mail, and my ex answering the door. And I said, why are you here? And he said, I'm gonna be staying here for a little while. My mother identified with him. And guess what? My mother was abused. And guess what my grandmother did? Rita, don't call the police on that man. Don't do that, right? So that's an intergenerational transmission. That is a learned behavior. When people say generational curses, we need to be very careful, because when you call something a curse, you take your power away to change it. These are generational behaviors. Let's call them what they are so we can get our power back to change them. Because if you don't, your daughter and your granddaughter and 7 generations after will find themselves in the same situation. When you heal yourself, you heal your grandmother. When you heal yourself, you heal your daughter. My daughter doesn't know the life I had. She has a very different existence, and I'm grateful for that. Because I did the work, and because I did the work, when my mother looks at me, she sees what she couldn't do. And so we don't have a relationship. Okay? So when Dr. Macardo asked, how do women get to that place? We are programmed and conditioned. And remember, even if it's trauma, even if it's unhealthy, as long as it's familiar, it has legs, and can continue.
That's beautifully stated, and that's real.
Yeah.
That is real. The number one question I get asked, I've been doing this work for 20 years, the number one question I get asked is, why they stay? Why they stay? If that was me, it was not you. But, you know, people don't understand it, right, who hasn't, like, been through it. And it's just not as easy as walking out the door. You know, people stay for a lot of different reasons we just talked about, cultural reasons. The number one reason people stay is they want to keep their family together. Never underestimate that. If there are children involved, people want that idea of the nuclear family, particularly if they never had it. Particularly if they're like, well, he's abusive to me, but he's a good father. He's a good man. He's a great father, right? Which we all know is bull, right? You can't be a good father if you're abusing the parent, right? But people see that, right? And they want to stay for the children, right? Financial reasons, we talked about that. They may be the person who you are dependent on for to pay all your bills. They may be the person keeping you from being homeless, right? So you're gonna want to stay with them, right? It might be as simple as that you love them. I love them and I don't want to leave them, and the love may be toxic, but it's still love for you, right? Lack of information. You don't know where to go. Who heard about Genesee Center before you walked through this door? Oh, that's great. Okay, but a lot of people haven't, right? And we've been around for 45 years, right? And so there's this idea of where are we gonna go, right? And then if I were to come up to you and be like, you could go to a shelter, who's gonna be like, oh, yay, I wanna go to a shelter and take my kids to a shelter, right? Because shelters get a bad rap, right? Now, Genesee's incredibly beautiful. Yeah. We have 2 transitional housing apartments. Just gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. If anybody wants to do a tour, let me know. I'd be more than happy to do that for you. But, you know, oftentimes people are discouraged from going into shelters, right? And so they stay where they are. I have talked to so many women and men who stayed where they were at because they're like, I'm not gonna leave my home. I'm not gonna leave my stuff. And so it's like you're being beaten over stuff, like you're dying over stuff. Like you can leave and come to us and we'll give you better stuff and a better life. We'll help you with that, we promise, right? And so that's part of it too. And another part of it is the most dangerous time for a person who's being abused is when they actually do walk out that door. All right? The majority of people who are killed have left their abusers. So when you turn on the television and you're seeing stories about somebody that's been kidnapped, shot, acid thrown in their face, and you're like, why did they just leave? They have left, right? And the abuser has lost all control, right? And so I always caution people, like it's just, people have to create sometimes what's called a safety plan, right? Where they have to get ready to get ready, right? And so that is the thing that's important, like to know. She just was so on point about our distrust of social systems, our fear of law enforcement, because not only do we not want our partner to go to jail, but we don't want to go to jail either. Right? And I'm sure everybody's heard of the dominant aggressor law, where if the police come through the door and they just can't figure out who it is, they're taking you both to jail. Guess what's happening to the kids if the kid is in the house? Right? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to risk losing their kids, right? And so it is such a complicated situation, and I always urge people to give people grace and just to show empathy. You don't have to understand why somebody stays, right? But just be empathetic towards them, right? And be willing to help them, right? That's all anybody can do, right? If we're trying to make a difference for somebody who finds themselves in these type of situations. And trust me, offering people grace will help people leave more than judgment, right? Because nobody wants to hear, I told you so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say because, like, I told you they was no good, right? Who wants, they need you. Shame, right? And you have enough shame on your own, right? Without the added shame.
Absolutely. If I could just add one more point to our discussion of cultural norms. The other aspect that is tough in our wonderful community is going to the doctor. You know, I was gonna say it. And that's another reason why this expo is such a big deal, because you're all here and you all represent your individual communities, your nieces, cousins, daughters, sisters, you all are gonna get this information and send it back into the community. And that's why we're here, because we have dedicated our lives to want to help you and be that bridge and be that community. Please see your doctor, please see your OBGYN, please. Please, because we often are, as we talked about, kind of the last piece of the puzzle, right? And so a lot of us, we try to get our emotional lives together before we handle the physical, right? We push it off to the side, and oftentimes it is too late, but we are here to be your partner. I just want to say that. All of the Black physicians in the room, that's the whole core purpose of us being here. So those are also things that are hard for our community to do sometimes. Like, we love expos, we love information, but when it comes to making that appointment for your mammogram, for your P.A.P. smear, yes, I'm saying it, it gets put on the to-do list. So that's just a reminder, once we are addressing all the other things that we need to when it comes to resources, that we circle back to the physical aspect of things, because that allows us to keep going, right? Sorry, that's just Shane.
No, and I wanted to thank you for sharing that, because we actually just did a study, a health study with people who are victims of domestic violence, but some of the same sort of findings came, that there's a fear of going to the doctor that keeps people from going to the doctor. There's a fear of judgment, right? About you haven't been taking care of yourself, right? Let's say you, God forbid, you have an issue, right? Like maybe you have a substance abuse issue, or you're unhoused, right? There's sort of an embarrassment about going and telling the truth and sort of getting the help that you need. And so it is important that you prioritize that, and you don't let fear stop you, because if you catch something early enough, that can make all the difference between life and death, right?
Right.
You can't let fear stop you.
But it's also our responsibility to, as physicians, to meet you where you're at, right? And it's to partner with wherever you are at. Even if that means that we gotta make a couple of visits once a month to get you where you need to be. That is our obligation, that is our responsibility. It's not just to beat you over the head with the information, right? But it's to partner with you based on exactly where you're at. And those are the types of physicians that really do make a big difference, right? And really do make a big impact. And so that's most certainly what I definitely would want for everyone in this room, and of course everyone here on this panel as well.
I just want to add a quick tip for those in the room. When you're talking about going to the doctor, please don't be afraid to interview your physician. So you are the patient. They are there in service of your best interest in your health. When people come in my office for their intake, if they don't like me, I find them somebody else. It's okay. I won't be offended. Because what I want is for you to get what you need, right? So it's okay for you to call, to actually doctor shop, to go to the website, to call, and to even ask questions and say, if I were to tell you this, how would you respond? I've done that. If I were to tell you this, how would you respond? Because you want to make sure that the person who's serving you is culturally competent. I don't want to have to code switch when I go to see my GYN. I don't want to have to pretend when I go to see my primary care physician. And I definitely ain't pretending when I go see my therapist, honey, because I see her every week. Okay, I gotta stay well. Okay? So it's okay. Empower yourself to ask those questions. And if they get offended, they are not for you.
That part.
Thank you all so much. I know we're gonna have some time for questions from the audience, but I really wanted to emphasize this. I know that we said it's a blessing and a curse that your provider, your physician cannot report, or we're not obligated, we're not mandated to report in many states intimate partner violence. But you know what that does? That opens up a window so that you have someone that you can talk to. So we want to be able to change this narrative. We want to be the safe space where you can, and where we can give you you know, the number for Genesees and other locations that can support women. Because so many women keep it inside and they're afraid to tell anybody for fear of judgment, for fear of shame, to feel like a failure, that they made a bad mistake, that God's mad at them, that they can't leave because God hates divorce. Well, let me tell you, you gotta read the whole chapter. Because it says something completely different, and I'll give it to you right now. It's Malachi 2:13 through 17. Because he is a God of justice. And you are his daughters. You are royalty. And your daughters and sisters are royalty. Nowhere, I'm not going to preach, I'm sorry. Nowhere does it say that someone can lay their hands on you or anybody else or control you. It's supposed to be the opposite. But what we are experiencing is, it's the result of the fall, where they think they have to control us. But that's not what was intended. That was not the design. So after today's session, I want you to be empowered to be that safe space, that non-judgmental space, to share this flyer, take a picture of it, and share it on your social media so we can start letting more folks know what the truth is. And we can start changing the culture. Not to shame our grandparents, not to shame our great-great-grandparents, but have compassion to understand that what they experienced was what they did to survive. But we don't have to live like that anymore. Okay? So right now we're gonna go ahead and open it up for questions. There's a mic right here at the front.
Piggyback on what
Dr. Parker.
and Dr. Parker Angie said earlier, is that you mentioned the DV 101 class, right? So I still do, not as much, but I train case managers, physicians, other therapists, because everybody is not well versed in the nuance of intimate partner violence. And so when I was in my clinicals, I kept saying the same thing over and over again. So I said, let me put this in a book. It's on Amazon. I have copies here because I need people. It's like 70 pages. It's a quick read because I need people to be able to say, oh, moving the goalpost. What is that? What is that? X factor. What is that? Right? These very subtle things that we see, but we don't know what they're pointing to. So that is why I wrote the book. And there's a little bit about my story in there, but it's not about me. It's really about educating the masses to say, no, that ain't right.
Doesn't matter what those abs look like or how fine they are.
Hey, Queen. Is familiar to them. The brain sees familiarity as safety. So even if it is a difficult, painful, hurtful, and potentially lethal situation, it's not as simple as them saying, because they're going to miss that person. I promise you they're going to miss that person. Okay? A patient I worked with, she almost died. They divorced. This was a year later. He had methodically planned, killed himself. Broke into her apartment, shot her in front of her daughters, and then killed himself. Wow. Even in our work together, which is why I do EMDR, which is why I do hypnosis, so I can get to that subconscious mind and those trauma capsules and process that stuff out. She said, is this my fault? This man is dead and gone. And she was still trying to reconcile if it was her fault or not. Let me tell y'all something. The only cause of abuse, the only cause of rape is the rapist or the abuser. Yeah. The only. So I want you all to really understand, it's not just a heart matter. It is literally a psychological and neurological matter that you are fighting against to get somebody to wake up and see what's happening. Okay?
Will you please say the name of your book?